Hey guys, welcome back to the Masterpiece Ministries podcast. This is Abby, and we are back, and we are rolling into having some guests back on the podcast. And so I thought I would start with a fan fave from last season. So today we are bringing Gina back on the pod. You knew her a bunch of episodes ago. She was actually the first live taped guest of the podcast. And she talked about her story and things with her husband and her loss of her child. And she had a really good story of hope and redemption. And so we are bringing her back today because there was so much for her to talk about that we couldn't fit it all into one episode. And so we're going to bring her back for a two-parter. We're going to do one part about marriage and hearing her talk about her marriage and some advice and wisdom for people seeking that. And then the second episode, you'll just have to come back and watch next week to find out what else she wants to talk about on the podcast. So without further ado, let's go ahead and chat with Gina. All right, we are here with Gina. Hello, Gina. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. How have you been since we last saw you on the podcast?
Been doing pretty good. I feel like same old, family life. We just moved, so house things are fun.
That's
so
right. Aren't you living on like a family
family compound? Family compound. Yes.
You're going full Christian family where everyone lives on the same piece of land.
Yes.
Although it sounds actually kind of nice.
It is nice. It is so nice. And
if you like your family.
I was gonna say I'm very, very blessed with my family. So
good.
We are
good.
We are doing good. So
love that. When was the last? When did we? I don't even remember when that. What month are we in?
Podcast?
This is like July, right?
It was like your third or fourth, I think, podcast. So
maybe in like April-ish.
I was gonna say I feel like it was like cold outside, so that's that.
The weather outside is frightful.
Yeah. It's been a while.
Weird seasons. Mm-hmm. Cool. So you've been good.
We've been good.
Anything new? Anything fun? Fresh?
Honestly, I feel like right now, and it's kind of been in like a being still season, so nothing, you know what I'm saying? Like nothing too new, just kind of, I don't know, but there's purpose behind it. So it's been good.
Yay.
Yeah.
Love that for you.
Good.
So wanted to bring Gina back on the pod because, she is married. She's a married woman. And when going through like the Spotify analytics to look at like who watches the podcast, who listens, who tunes in, all that stuff, it's a lot of girls and a lot of young girls.
Right.
And as we both know, a lot of young girls want to be married one day. Thank you, Disney, for indoctrinating all of us.
Right.
So anyways, I thought it would be fun to bring Gina on the podcast today to kind of like talk about your experience with marriage. And you got married relatively young, right?
Yeah.
How long have you and your husband been married?
I was 20 and I'm 27 now.
Oh,
so yeah, it was 2017. So we were babies.
Okay, so this is good though because I was doing like a school thing this week, working for the school, and I don't know why we got on this topic. We were doing curriculum writing, and somehow we got on the topic of getting married young, and literally all these women were like, don't do it, it's a trap. And then I learned that like 5 of them had all gotten married at like 22 and then like divorced and are remarried. A lot of them are remarried now, but like a lot of them were like, no, you don't know who you are, and it's a trap, and it's a disaster. Like, and I'm like, my sister got married when she was like 23. Like, I know some people who have like been married young successfully. So anyways, I want to bring you on to kind of chat about some marriage things, a little bit of advice, wisdom for people, and also what it looks like to be different, because in that setting, I know a lot of those, I'm pretty sure none of those people that I was with are Christians.
Right.
And so how it looks like when you have a marriage that is the way that God designed it and the way that it's like kind of supposed to be, for lack of a better term. But and of course, it's not perfect either.
Right.
But yeah, you're going to share a little bit about that. So your husband is Jake.
His name is Jake. Yeah.
Right? Not Jake. Do you call him Jacob?
It depends on my mood.
Okay, that's fair enough. That's like when I'm in trouble, I was like, Abigail Grace. Yeah, exactly.
He's Jake, yeah.
Nice. So how'd you guys meet?
So we actually, sounds so cliche in this part of our story. Okay. I honestly hate sharing, but it's fine.
I'm sorry.
Because I'm like, even though we got married so young, I first want to preface with saying like we are not perfect by no means, and it has not been all rainbows and butterflies. But we met when I was in high school. He just graduated high school, so we went to the same high school. We both went to
That's right. Yes.
Yeah, the same school, but we had different friend groups, so we really didn't meet till he was out. And
Sounds like jail. He was out.
He was out.
Got
he got
out.
out. And we met at Subway. I worked at Subway.
Romance.
And
He said, "Give me an Italian."
I was not looking. I was like in cosmetology school while in high school. I was like, I want none of it. Like, I want to get my certification, get going. And yeah, we met at Subway.
Like he was a customer?
He was a customer, yeah.
Oh,
and
slay.
when I say pursue, find someone that pursues you. He pursued. He came in for that cold cut.
That's the thing is that I haven't been to Subway in a while. Maybe that's
Subway.
what I'm missing out on.
Oh, man,
I was thinking about where I wanted to get dinner tonight.
Subway.
So maybe I'll have to hit up
Lord, is that you?
Okay, wait. So he was a customer?
He was a
literally
customer.
just like,
we went to high school
I like
together.
you. Oh, yeah. Okay, that's right.
Yeah, but actually, like, literally, like, I don't know if it was a pickup line or what, but, you know, like, Subway does, well, I don't know, inflation right now. They're probably not doing many deals, but,
yeah, fair.
But, you know, it's like they do, like, sub of the month or, like,
Sure.
$3, 6 inches or
Sure.
$2, whatever. So I rung him up, and, like, again, I was not looking, so I was, like, kind of a jerk, you know, and just staying, whatever, this guy's, like, trying to hit on me, and he's like, ma'am, did you get my drink? And, like, trying to make eye contact, and, like, you could just tell, like, his vibes. I was like, it's on sale this month. It's $2 this month. And I was just like, very cold.
Oh.
And then he just kept coming in, though. He was like, who's
you're
that girl
like-
I think that girl went to our school. Who's that girl that works at Subway? And everyone's like, oh, Gina, she's so focused. She won't give you the time of day.
He said, challenge accepted.
Challenge accepted. Checkmate.
Nice. I love that for you.
Yes.
Okay, so how did you know that he was the one you wanted to marry? Like, what was different about him? Did you date other people before him?
I did.
And, yeah.
Yeah, I did. So, not many. Like, I wasn't ever, like, I don't
Yeah,
know.
because you were 20 also.
Yeah.
Or this is younger.
This
I'm
was
sure,
younger.
actually,
Yeah, we met when I was 18. So,
Okay.
like, old enough, but, like, not really, you know,
Yeah,
whatever.
fair.
But the way, I feel like kind of 2 or 3 kind of things. One, the way he pursued me, I felt like was, like, a clear cut, like, and his intentions behind it, too. Not just, like, oh, this girl's hard to get. Like, you know, like, the way he looked at me and pursued me. I was like, oh, that's different. Like, this is different than other high school guys, you know? And then I think, too, something I look back at now at probably being a thing was just the ease of it, too. Like, how easy it was. And I feel like when things are often pleasing to God, they're often somewhat also easy. Or, like, you know, when God gives us his approval. Like, it's not like...
Yeah, you're not, like, fighting against
it. And,
yeah.
Again, our whole marriage has not been easy.
Right.
But in the beginning, when I was like, okay, this man and his character, like, where we could be cohesive and work together with that. So, yeah, I think those are my top 2 for that one.
You know the song, I ranted on Instagram about this at one point. Okay, I'm not a Swiftie by any definition. Are you?
Right. No.
Okay, marvelous.
Yeah.
You won't be offended when
No,
I
I
say
won't.
this
I
then. Some people will be, though, and that's okay. If you don't like me because of my opinions of Taylor Swift,
It's okay.
it's fine. I'm not upset with it.
Right.
But she has a song called The Way I Loved You. Do you know the song?
No.
I miss screaming and fighting and kissing in the rain. It's 2 a.m. and
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
cursing your name.
Yeah.
Right. Because it starts off with, like, he is sensible. And so, okay,
Right,
so, like,
right.
the song, she's, like, talking about, like, this one guy who's, like, her boyfriend, that he's, like, so great, he does all the right things, and, like, he
Right.
calls when he says he's going to, and then it's, like, but I miss screaming and fighting.
Right.
She's talking about this, like, ex-boyfriend she had
That's
that was,
terrible.
like,
I remember
toxic.
this now. I think I responded to your DM about
and
it.
she's basically saying, like, man, this guy actually, like, treats me right and, like, does all the right things, but, like, I miss, like, having to, like, not know if you even love me or not, or, like, being so up
like,
and down or whatever.
honestly
and I'm like,
terrible.
why do we crave that? Like, some
No.
people do. Like, some people want,
Right.
you know, they want their relationship to be, like, exciting because, like, that's, like, captivating and, like, you know, it's challenging, but then it's fun, but then it's not. And, like, I mean, I'm somewhat guilty of this sometimes, too.
Right.
But like what you mentioned is like a lot of times
Right.
people aren't looking for something that's just like peaceful.
Right.
And like you feel secure.
Right.
And like confident.
Yep.
Like that feels like it's like, ooh, boring.
Yes.
And like a pastor that I follow is like, you want your marriage to be boring.
Right.
In that sense.
In that
right?
sense.
Like you want your marriage
Yes.
to be like you don't have to guess whether your like husband loves you or not every single day or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
And to go off that, just because when you said that, it just reminded me too. Like I saw this thing, anyways, it was like a couple weeks ago, but it was about just like loving each other through weaknesses too. And I feel like that was another telltale sign was like, I can still, like, not that I'm toxic. I'm not toxic. But I can still have, like, you know,
You have your
weaknesses.
moments. Yeah.
And him seeing the light in those weaknesses. And I'm like...
and not, like, shaming you for
Shaming
them
him for
or
it.
things.
And so, like, it doesn't always have to be, like, an adventure in that sense. But, you know what I'm trying to say. You catch my drift on there. So,
I got you.
Yeah.
So you got married at 20. Been married for, you say 7
Almost 7 years,
Wow.
yeah.
Okay. Almost a decade.
I
Crazy.
know. Yeah. So we've known each other for 10, or been dating.
I love that. Okay, and then you can answer these in, like, whichever way you want. But what is, like, the hardest part about marriage that people don't talk about? Because I feel like we, like, kind of know. Some people will say, oh, this is hard. But, like, what is something that's, like, challenging that, like, maybe a lot of people don't like talking about for whatever reason? And what's something that's great about marriage that maybe a lot of people don't talk about?
Love it. Yeah. So, I'm sorry. The first question of that was, remind me.
What's something that's hard about marriage? Because a lot of people think that, like, I'm going to get married, I'm going to find my person, and we will just ride off into the sunset forever and, like, just hang out all the time and have sex and, like, cool and, like, you know what I mean? Like, everyone's just thinks it's, like, we're going to go to Bora Bora, we're going to live our best lives, and I will have my person, and then I will be complete and whole. And it's like, okay, well, let's talk about what it, like, really looks like.
Yeah. The hardest thing I think I've come to learn, and especially I'll say with getting married young too, was that, like, who you are then, who you are maybe in the start of the relationship isn't always who you will be, and neither will he, you know? And so learning each other as you guys are both growing, I think has been maybe, like, more so a challenge, you know? Because who I was before all these things happened to us is not who I am now, you know? And
So do you have, like, an example of that?
Yeah, so just... When we met, I was very much a people pleaser. I was not healed in that sense. I wasn't, you know, I didn't, my faith also too, I feel like in the beginning it was there, but it wasn't so much the forefront, you know? And so now as I've been working on my healing journey and all these things have happened to us, like trauma and grief and back surgeries and all these things, right? It's like we have grown in different ways and making sure that we're still unified, even through our how we're now different, you know? That has been a big one because, you know, when you're learning boundaries, even if it's with your spouse, it's like, I always joke that, like, sometimes I heal too much, right? And it's like, now I'm just, like, not taking anything, you know? And it's like making sure, like, okay, whoa, you know, he respects these new boundaries, which he does. But then also I'm doing it with grace as well. Yeah. And I don't always do that. So that's been when we've struggled.
Yeah.
One of the
and I think a lot of people,
things.
like you mentioned, like you're not the same person. Like I think people have to really remember that. It's like the person that if you're in a relationship with someone or you're dating or I mean, whatever, you're engaged, you're getting married, like this person, you're going to be with this person for the next, you know, like I'm 28. So like if I was to get married next year, like I'm probably going to live to 80. Like you can be married for forever. 60 years. Like that person shouldn't be the same person. But I think I've heard a lot of people too. I've heard this from a few different podcasts I've listened to where it's like you start to like fall in love again with your person in the different facets of who they are. Right. Like, okay, yeah, I met you and you were a certain way and now you're different in this way and I get to relearn, like, I get to learn a new side of, because I think that's when a lot of people are like, I'm out. Like, I'm dipping. Yeah, and it's so easy. Like, we have, you know, a lot of people just will use divorce, you know, that irreconcilable differences or whatever it's called. Like, you know, it's just like, we're just too different and we just can't, and we grew apart. And I'm like, but didn't you expect that? Like, that's what always kind of like, I wonder about is like, I just don't think people expect that. Like, people don't anticipate that.
They run when it's tough.
Yeah, and that's 40 years, 50 years. Like, so, like you talked about, so many things can happen that you never would have anticipated would have happened. Yep. And if you don't build your foundation on something deeper than that, then you're going to be like, yep, this is too hard. Right. I'm not trying to like shame people or whatever, but I feel like it's important to talk about that before you get into it.
And understand too. And just like, even when looking at like, if marriage is something, you know, whatever, for the time of life that you're in, it's heavy stuff. But then also spinning off of what you just said too, I feel like the biggest thing that I've also overcome within my own self, and then he's also overcome with himself, is a lot of times when it gets hard or where we feel like our needs aren't met or like whatever, it's like sometimes you just have to like, and I'm not saying like tolerate like mistreatment or whatever, but like just loving the person first and like who am I to say, like, I deserve this without giving that? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Like,
and realizing that you're not perfect either.
yeah. And so I think a lot off of what you said, it's just understanding, like, where pride takes place in us. In our
And I
relationships.
think, like, having a God, which we'll get to that in a little
Yeah.
bit, but I think that is the difference maker.
Yeah.
So then, okay, so then
I think that was my point to that. Sorry.
Yeah, no,
you
you're
finished
good.
it. You perioded it.
What's the best part about being married?
I think, honestly, the companionship. Like, yeah, rainbows and butterflies. Anyone that knows me knows I'm not really, like, a sap either. Like, I'm not, it's, like, I love people hard, but, like, I love you. I'm not like, oh, I love you so much. You know what I'm saying?
I got you.
So, I feel like, for me, just having the companionship is nice. But then also, when you do find the right person, finding someone that just gets you. So, when you're off, like, oh, Gina's having a terrible day, but I know why without having to dig or probe or pride. That's been something different where I would say, like, companionship could be friends or could be your spouse.
Sure, yeah.
That is where I feel like it's different. Or, like, I can look at Jake and be like, I know exactly what's going on. He doesn't even need to tell me right now. You know, where communication is key. But then there's also a point where it's like, that's nice. It's different.
Yeah. And, like, other people that you don't live with and like, are so, like, closely walking with, like, aren't going to know.
Aren't going to get it.
Those things about you. Nice. Love that.
Yeah.
So we kind of alluded on this when we were talking about the last question, but your marriage is obviously has God at the center of it. So, like, how do you practically, you know, everyone says, put God at the center of your marriage. Okay, what does that mean? So, like, what does that practically look like? And then what do you think the difference maker is for people who are in, like, God-honoring marriages? Like, how do you think that's different than the world? And I will say before you answer, is that, like, something that I get irritated about sometimes as a single person, is trying to, like, look for the right things. Is that, like, and I talked about this in the first episode of this season. Is that, like, there's some non-Christian marriages that, like, flourish and, like, you know, or at least seem perceived to be flourishing. And so, but what do you think separates Christian, like, true Christian marriages that are not, you know, one guy is, you know, because a lot of people perceive that Christian marriage is like the woman is just quiet and doesn't say anything and just does whatever her husband says, which maybe we can even talk about that a little bit.
Dabble on that a little bit.
But, like, a lot of people have this misconception that that's what a Christian marriage looks like. It's just like a really quiet, submissive wife and a domineering man. And that you just have a bunch of kids and she stays home and, you know, so what does that actually look like and why do you think it's different than the rest of the world?
The rest of the world. I think for me personally, and I'll also touch on just a little back history because I think it just helps. In our marriage, like, Jake definitely grew up, like, knowing God, but I think God's kind of given me the reins in guiding that area of our faith together. So I'm going to touch just because it makes, I feel like, a little bit more sense.
Go ahead. Go for it.
But for me personally, it has been, and maybe our paths are different in this, but for me, just looking at marriage as also how God just also loves the church and his children and giving more that as my example on what a true marriage should be, as opposed to so-and-so next door and their marriage, you know, not looking at them for help and for advice, but looking to God and what scripture says about marriage. And you kind of touched on, actually, when we were looking at, you know, what we were going to chat about before, my biggest actually point was Ephesians 5:22-25, which is kind of like a controversial, which I'm going to pull it up. This, I use the Message Bible, which I don't know if you use that, but
that's controversial
kind of,
in itself.
I use all things, but that's like
your main Bible
not
translation?
as my main, but like my study Bible.
I was gonna say,
but I wrote down NIV just for, like, the true.
Well, I have CSB, so we'll have different. 3 different. Let's read it in all 3 and see what the differences are.
And then I'll kind of touch on, like, how honestly this passage has been something that when our marriage has struggled, it is because I feel like I am not looking at this passage correctly or not implementing it correctly. And when it has flourished, I have noticed that I have been mindful of it.
So Ephesians 5:22, you said? Okay. Yeah, go for it.
So wives, submit yourself to your own husbands as you do to the Lord. For the husband is the head of the wife as, I'm sorry, for the husband is the head of the wife as Christ is the head of the church. Then it goes on to say, husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for it. So I feel like that's important to me is because, and this too, I'm going to say, people can interpret this so many different ways. And I feel like that's when it also gets controversial because I don't feel like God's saying like wives just submit to your husband and like
do whatever they say.
Do whatever they say
with qualms.
Right, right. I don't feel like that's what he's saying. To me, I see that as wives respect, love, trust, allow your husband to take the reins of the household. But then also he says, husbands, love your wives just as Christ has loved the church. Christ died for the church. So husbands, also return that with treating your wives with such and love that you will daily. Die to yourself for that person. And God's also not saying like wives don't have opinions or don't have input in anything. That's not what he's saying. I look to that more so as, okay, I have, what am I trying to say? I have maybe these expectations or these opinions and what I want for our family, but I'm also going to take a step back and also respect, you know, what Jake's saying because God has placed Jake in my life to lead this family in a way. And, you know, the Bible kind of goes on a lot to talk about how like the husbands are the leaders of the household and all, and the wives are the help, but the helping still has such purpose and I've found that when I put my pride aside and look at what God's really saying about that, just our marriage has flourished, you know?
Yeah, and I like as somebody who is like a dominant personality, like I'm very bold, I'm very outspoken, I'm very like not that I'm like I do submit to authority, like especially at my work and stuff like that. I'm like I am a rule follower, but I'm also a person that's like don't tell me what to do, especially. But I realized for me because I thought about this a lot, going to like Christian conferences and women's content and things like that. You always hear that, and I was like wrestling with this a lot. I was like, okay, but I was also born with things that I'm passionate about and I have opinions about, and like God doesn't just want me to be this like quiet little woman who never says anything, but yet at the same time the Bible still calls for this. So then how do I like hold both of those things in the same hands? And I realized for me that like it's all about if I can trust you or not. Like I don't think it's just blindly submit to anybody who says that they want to be. And a lot of guys will be like, I want a submissive wife. Like, and they don't really know what that means.
I was gonna say, and
like,
that's not God's
You just want to be in charge of somebody and boss someone around. That's not good. Like you need to examine your heart. That's not what that means. Like. And I realized like if I can trust you, then I will very easily put aside like. But if I don't feel safe with you, then I'm gonna do what I want to do, what I feel like God's telling me to do, because why should I trust you? So like, especially we talk about non-believers and stuff like that, like you should, if you are a Christian, you should not be dating a non-believer because you are not able to submit to him because he's not submitted to God. Like, and so no wonder you're not going to trust him because he's not leading you to places that you should be going. My gosh. And go ahead. No,
I was just going to say, and that's where I feel like this verse is only beneficial when you know that your spouse is someone that God wants in your life. Because if it's not, I mean, then there's no God. That's not, God's like, end it. That's not what I'm talking about here. You know?
Absolutely.
So.
And there's another thing that I've heard from people is that like guys want respect, like men want respect and women want to feel safe or like loved. And once you also think about that, the differences between men and women and like how they're wired, like, okay, that makes like women want to feel like I'm cared for, you love me, I don't have to question that. Like a lot of women's issues are like self-value, worth, identity, like type things. And then like I think guys a lot of times they just want to know that like you respect them, that you care for them enough to like listen to them and things like that. And so that's what this verse is like saying.
Literally,
is
I was
like
just gonna say
women
that.
want to feel safe and secure and like know that you're not going to leave them. Like Christ loved the church.
Right.
Like he was committed to them. He was
Right.
going to do anything for them.
Right.
And men want to feel like, okay, you trust what I'm saying
Right.
is true, and like you're going to show me the respect to like not always have. There's other verses talk about like don't be like a nagging wife. Like don't be somebody as a woman who's going to constantly cause conflict.
Exactly.
Like, then why did you marry this man? Like, if you don't trust anything he says, or if you have something to say about everything he says, like, guys don't want to hear that.
Right.
Like, no. Should you have an opinion? Yes. But at some point, you need to trust your husband that, like, he's leading your family, or else he's going to constantly be in his head about his self-worth. And, like, can I lead this family? Can I lead this woman? Like, whatever. So, anyways.
That's where I've definitely felt like there's been strife. And then also just like God's literally giving us this blueprint because of what you just said. Like these are what men and women need just for our own success too. Like I need my back patted sometimes saying that I'm doing a good job. You know what I'm saying? And he needs to be like, okay, she trusts me. Like I'm doing a good job as the man. Like we need these things, but it doesn't, so mic drop. I agree with that.
Yeah. And earlier when you were talking about, like I can have, when I put my pride aside, like I can see things in a different way, or I can love him a certain way. Like, and again, that all goes back to the basis of our faith, where we know that life is better lived when we're humble, and when we are able to put someone else before ourselves, and when we can learn how to not just be angry. Angry is not bad, but then to not let it let you to sin. Like, all those things that I think in marriages with non-believers become these big explosive, fights and things like that. Like, again, not to say that, like, Christians don't have their own issues by any means, but then we're always, like, rooted back in that, like, okay, like, I'm going to be humble. I'm going to love them. I'm going to put them before myself. I'm going to be, I have the fruits of the Spirit are written on this like whiteboard where we're filming. I'm like, okay, I'm going to love them. I'm going to have joy. I'm going to embrace peace. I can have self-control. Like think about how many marriage problems there are with lack of self-control. Like because you're going out on people or you're looking at what, patience. I'm going to be patient with her because God's patient with me. I'm going to show him all that stuff. Like that's what our faith is rooted in. And then that projects into marriage when you have that base that you're built on. If you don't have that base, then you're just going off your feelings. Like you're not being guided by anything. So.
And I feel like that's how I look at that too. I'm like, I love this man, so I'm going to submit myself because I respect him. Like I feel like it's more so that respect on both ends. And that's where, I feel like if I had the other, I don't know, I am a strong woman, but like if I was leading this family, it would not be successful. Okay, I'd be going to the grocery store being like, y'all take Afterpay, like I'm not. I just feel like I don't know. There's just something about it. Okay, and I know to each their own.
Hey, I do think Aldi lets you split up your grocery payments in 4 installments if you really want to.
Danger. Well, if I was single, that's where I'd be. Just kidding. Totally kidding on that. But awesome. I just feel like so much truth in that.
So then, what wisdom do you have? And I always ask this question interestingly because. As someone who I have to take a break from like single Christian content because sometimes I'm like, oh my gosh. So I don't know if you have something interesting. But what wisdom do you have for Christians, speaking specifically to Christian young women who like desire marriage, who want to have a husband, who are in their early 20s, who are trying to figure life out, like what wisdom do you have for them in that stage of life?
I think to answer this for me, it's kind of split 2 ways. So one for those women, and then also one for in the waiting too, when like that, okay, you've check marked my first point, so then you move on to the next. But for me, when you're young, I would say like, and I know also it's hard to take advice from someone that's like, oh girl, you've been married since you're 20, like whatever. But still, seeking Jesus first. And not so much seeking...
Seek Jesus.
Yeah, seek...
My sweatshirt.
There we go, girl. Okay, period. God, okay. I didn't even see that. I love it. But seeking Jesus first and looking at, like, God as the qualities of God that you want in a man. And not so much, like, trying to find a man. Like, seeking Jesus, working on your faith, having that be the priority. Then, and I feel like God will bless you and it'll come and... I don't feel like we always are supposed to know, like, yeah, God wants us, places us in places that we're, to find our spouse. But I mean, I was at Subway, and like he still walked in. You. It could happen anywhere. So that would be my first point. And then my second would be like in the waiting. And I feel like I can say this because I've waited in other seasons.
Yes, and we all have seasons of waiting.
I think it's just in any season of waiting, you really learn there is always purpose, there's always provision, and there is always protection. Like 3 Ps. I don't know why it always comes to my mind.
Say those one more time.
Purpose, protection, and provision. So guidance in any season of waiting, I feel. So like even if you're not meeting or not finding the one, I always try to look at that as like, even when I'm not getting something, like, okay, what is God protecting me from right now? Like, maybe you would have met a guy that would have treated you like garbage and you would have gone through all this trauma and God would have, then you would have had to heal and work on all that. Like right now you're focusing on God, so you're not experiencing that, and then God's going to bless you.
Yeah. And I like how you said the like find a guy who has qualities of God that you're looking for, which you can't know unless you know who God is first. Like, I think when I was younger, like, I had a very shallow understanding of who God was. Like, I knew, like, vaguely, like, I grew up in church. Like, I knew who God was as, like, an entity and, like, what he did for me, whatever. But, like, I didn't really know, like, facets of people to look for, or God's personality or his characteristics that could be, like, embodied in people after you've like had a changed heart and the Holy Spirit lives within you and whatever. And so like I just thought it was something where I could just like make you into it. Like I could just, you could just get around me and be in my presence and like my family's rhythms and things like that, and you would just like get it. Like, and I mean, I've heard that called like missionary dating, when you're trying to like save somebody while you're dating them.
Yeah,
that doesn't
work. No.
And you just waste a lot of time.
Right.
So it's not worth it. Not like I'm like speaking from experience or anything. But yeah, like you can't know what you're looking for unless you know the person who created this person that you're looking for. Like God created whoever your husband is supposed to be, and so you have to know the creator first before you can know the creation. Like how else are you supposed to identify like that this is someone that God has given to me if I don't know who he is or what I'm looking for in him. So I love that.
Just to touch off that
go
really
for
fast, but I also have learned too that sometimes when that's like when people say like what I just said, like seeking Jesus or people like Jesus or whatever, it's also the other extreme where you're like, okay, I'm gonna find my perfect husband at church on Sunday night or Sunday morning and whatever, and it's gonna be clear cut, whatever. And yes, they need to know God for sure, but also I've learned just like that's not always necessarily the case. There unfortunately can be also like such corruption and sadness in that area too. Yeah. But then also,
are you saying like inside the like inside the church, there are people
they need to be this
who
perfect
might
person
like,
who are like Christians, like God or Jake when we first met. Like yes, he knew God, but it wasn't on the forefront of his life necessarily. And even though now, like yes, we both together are a faith-filled home. I will say he treated me more like Jesus than any person that I've ever met. Just the way he respected me. And cared for me and all the other things. So I just think pursuing, yes, they need to believe in God, but also just the traits and not so much. You know what I'm trying to say? I don't know
there's a author, oh my God, Tara Lee Cobble. She's like in her like early mid 40s and is like an author, and she wrote the Bible not the Bible Project, the Bible Recap. Have you ever seen the big blue Bible Recap book? Anyway, she's single and like think about like somebody like her who like has this like big theology knowledge, like, and I remember her saying like, I'm not looking for somebody who's like a theologian. Like you don't have to know as much as I do. Like I'm just looking for somebody whose heart is like surrendered to God and who loves her, which has honestly been something for me that like I've even been like, I want somebody who can like lead these like intense Bible studies and like which like maybe that'll happen, but like I also have to be like open to the fact that like I might be the person who has more like Bible knowledge or whatever. But like he still loves God with all of his heart, mind, and soul. Like it just looks different. Like, and a lot of people say that like the leader of the family should be the one who like knows all this stuff. And it's like, yeah, but like maybe the wife sometimes is gifted with being able to like teach this stuff to their family with their husband. You know, not like my husband's in the other room and like isn't engaged in it or whatever. But like, I think sometimes then women too could get like, I don't want to say too high of standards, but like, you kind of miss what's important. You're kind of being more of like a Pharisee-ish type thing when you're like, well, you have to have, like, I want all these verses memorized and I want all this and I want all that. But it's like, does he love the Lord? Like, you'll be able to tell if he loves the Lord based on how he treats you.
Yeah, and that's my point. And I'm sure Jake's going to listen to this and be like, I love God.
I'm
saying that. But like what you were saying, and then I think also sometimes, and like it could go either way, whatever dynamic. But for me, my faith is so strong that I see that also as me helping the family, like how God was saying that the women are the help. And to me, that's like what I feel like I'm giving this comfort. I'm giving, because I know what God's already saying. So like that to me is where I feel a lot of purpose in.
Love
so
that.
yeah,
Sweet.
Yeah.
Any last thoughts on marriage, singleness?
Yeah.
No. Are you happy that you're already? Every time I've met someone recently who's married at like 25, I'm like, you're lucky. It's ghetto out here. You don't want to be a part of it.
My goodness.
Be so happy that you. I'm like, what a blessing. You found your person early and you were good to go.
Right.
Sweet. Awesome. Well, yay. Thank you for sharing with us.
So
I think this is really helpful, and it's just like really cool to hear somebody else's insight who has been in it for a little bit. Who, you know, you're not like, I just got married last year and we just love everything about each other and everything's so great. Like, you've been through things. You're still married. You're still choosing this person. And so it also gives people hope that like that is out there, and it is a choice. Love is a choice, not just a feeling. So sweet. Well, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much.
We're going to be back next week too.
Yes,
with another little episode. So thank you so much for tuning in to this week's episode of the Masterpiece Ministries podcast, and we'll see you next time. Bye.